So we're starting our second cheap car challenge.
Inexpensive sports cars, cheap sports cars.
We're not just going to buy the worst thing we can find.
No,
we're not just going to take it to the shop and talk about it.
Shopping to own and love.
Manual transmission, rear wheel drive.
Has to be rear wheel drive.
But you know what I think we should do? Because we're going to see a lot of them when we search. I think we should avoid Miatas.
I think we should avoid Miatas and avoid 86s as well.
Okay, that's fair.
Those are out. We've covered those like crazy. They're out.
We're thrilled to have our friends at AutoTempest back this whole thing. It's making it easy. Cool. We can just go this one place.
Has to be a two-door genuine sports car, coupe or convertible.
Yes.
Manual and under $7,500.
Road trips, challenges.
Yes.
All through the snow on winter tires. These are going to be driven. We drove our old sedans a lot. These are going to be driven every bit as much or more. But this one's going to be different because A, we've planned it a little better, and B, we're going to take you from the very beginning.
You're watching Everyday Driver. We make a TV show, podcast,
and YouTube channels helping you find a car you'll love.
This is our second cheap car challenge, and with the help of AutoTempest, we're doing a year of adventures in $7,500 sports cars.
Subscribe so you don't miss a thing.
We now have to really kind of start calling, and that will determine which car we've got, and then plunk down some money.
There's the number of people that write to us on the podcast and say, I have $5,000 or $10,000, might be half our podcast, and all of them could buy this car. I was going to get a silver Boxster, but the truth is we've driven the Boxster in about every single form. I wanted a completely different experience, but I still wanted German to have that conversation about, you bought a cheap German car? So now for the first time in my life, I own a BMW and a convertible. A 6-speed straight 6 BMW in my life? That's good news. And that sounds great. One of the funniest things about when we buy these cars like this is we buy them in the way we actually don't recommend. We don't really do pre-purchase inspections. We do post-purchase inspections. We do watch the Carfax. The Carfax for this Z4 was incredibly boring. It was mundane. It's had 5 owners, that's right, 5 owners, but it's just had regular service. Nothing really wrong. I think the owner, when he passed off this car to me, I think Sam has never thought about selling a car this easily because I didn't check out much. I thought, you know what? I've dedicated myself to this car. I'm just going to embrace it and we'll find out what's wrong later. Don't do that, by the way. Please get yourself a pre-purchase inspection. But for us, part of this is just telling the story of how well did we do kind of sight unseen? How much did we accomplish getting a good car at a distance? This was bought in Phoenix. We're driving it back to Utah, which is a phenomenal drive. We're going straight through the dead center of Utah on some of our very, very favorite roads. I mean, look at this. They're fantastic. And what a way to get to know a car. So a $7,000 BMW that originally was probably about 45 grand. Let's ask the obvious question, and that is, what's broken? Honestly, not as much as you might think. Now, a lot of stuff is quite worn. The paint is not in great shape. And to his credit, Paul had the perfect answer for the poor paint on this car. When he found out that the paint was not in great shape, Paul looked at me and said, well, that's perfect for you then. But I come back to $7,000, and when I get this detailed, it's going to look far better than it does right now. The interior on this car has definitely seen better days. It desperately needs a good cleaning. The only thing I've found so far that actually flat out does not work reminds me of the Phaeton, and that is the passenger window. If you reach over here to the driver's door panel and you pull the window switch up to get the passenger window to go up, it only goes down. If the window's already down, it just sits there and does nothing. Luckily, the passenger door panel will raise that window because when you drop everything for the convertible for the first time, you kind of pray it goes back up. I did actually get in and check the top. I also checked the engine. I did check all the tires. I didn't completely just buy this car and walk away blindfolded. But there have been the little things that are hard to tell on a test drive that we keep going, oh, see, so that isn't quite right. Like the window. The air conditioner is phenomenal. This has heated seats, which I don't need today, but eventually I will need them and I will love having them. I wound up pleasantly surprised with the amount of room in the trunk. We actually got a full-size overhead case, Pelican case of gear and 2 loaded backpacks in the trunk with room left over. The real surprise, though, is the amount of room in this cabin. I'm 6'3" and I have a long torso. My head hits the ceiling on most cars. In this car, I've got 2 or 3 inches between the top of my head and the roof. The shoulder room is excellent, almost as good as normal sedans, believe it or not, and you've got a surprisingly big footwell. This is a genuinely comfortable car. Now, if you take a close look around the cabin or you get up close and inspect the paint, that's where $7,000 comes from, because there's a lot of wear here on all of the heavy touch points of the interior. Look at the pull handle on my door over here. The top of it is just worn off. That's where this 15, 16-year-old car seems at least that. You look at the paint, there's nicks, there's bumps. Somebody apparently opened the trunk at one point and just banged it right into a girder. But if you stand about a normal parking space away from this car, you don't see any of that. And when you drive it, you don't feel any of that. It just feels like, hey, I bought a sports car. This could be a car that costs 30 grand or 60 grand. The driving experience is irrelevant to the price. It's just fun, you're glad you have it, and then you go, oh wait, it cost me 7 grand. Now, we've driven the Z4 in the Z4 M spec, and we really, really like that, but that was a greatest hits car. That had the straight 6 from that awesome E46 M3. It also had the great hydraulic steering from that M3. This has neither of those. 228 horsepower, about 217 pound-feet of torque. It's not huge numbers, but this car only weighs 3,000 pounds, and it does have a great straight 6 BMW motor. I mean, that's what you want, isn't it? You can get this car with 2 straight 6 engines. There's the 2.5 and this one, the 3.0. What's nice is that the horsepower figures on this engine are almost exactly the same as that engine in Paul's car. We didn't plan for that, but man, we got close. This is the proper spec if you don't go M-Car, but let's be honest, $7,000 for this. There was no M-Car happening, but look at the car I got. I've never been a huge fan of the feel of a BMW manual transmission. Oftentimes they're a little rubbery for my taste. This one isn't that bad. The only time it actually bothers me is the fact that I've only driven this car for about 12 hours so far, and I'm still not great at jumping gears because I don't know exactly where the teeth are going to be. After you drive a car for a while, of course, you can get used to that, but I've driven other cars where I could get down the block and I could do it blindfolded. This isn't that clear. The suspension, because it's worn, is soft and a little bit unpredictable. It's not quite as refined as I'd like it to be. I think with some new struts under there, it's probably going to clean right up because this does pretty well on these corners. It's not the corner carver of the Lotus. Frankly, it's not the corner carver of a Boxster either, but it's not far away. The biggest problem I have is just no information out of the steering. The car gives you plenty of rotational information, but the steering is just numb because this is early gen electric steering here, which is why when they made the M car, they went back to the hydraulic. Doesn't matter. I'm in a convertible on an amazing road. I've honestly, okay, I have no steering feel. I have so many other feelings right now, it doesn't matter. Look at this road. When you drive this quickly, you can tell it's a step below the performance car. It's the JV team. They're good, they're not quite the seniors yet. One of the big surprises when I first got in this car is the length of the hood. This is not a huge car. 3,000 pounds, it is a roadster. It's bigger than a Miata, but it's smaller than most things out there. And yet, it feels like I'm way at the back of this long car because you're sitting on the back axle. So all it's got is nose out front. The point of rotation is actually ahead of your hips. It's kind of right here behind the dash. Right about in line with the steering wheel is the point at which you feel this car rotate. What I can tell about the car's level of traction comes from every other sensation except the steering wheel. I'm not a big fan of that. Paul actually is much more used to that than I am. I want to feel it here in the wheel. The weight here isn't changing, no matter what really happens, and no matter what happens to the grip. So the steering wheel becomes your direction finder, and it's good, and it dives in fairly quickly, and it just picks the direction of the car. And then the sensations travel through the car, through your hips and to the back axle, where you can feel the rotation after what you've asked of the steering wheel. What Paul and I would have done left to our own devices with $7,500 is I would have bought myself the nicest NC Miata I could get. Paul would have bought a Porsche Boxster, the nicest one he could get for $7,500, and we would have been done and we would have been happy. But to challenge ourselves, we said we couldn't do those two cars. So let's actually talk about how I've done in relation to those cars. This feels heavier than the Miata, because let's be honest, it's at least 500 pounds heavier than the Miata. It's 1,000 pounds heavier than my Elise. If I'd gotten into a Boxster, I would have known exactly what to expect. This keeps revealing new things to me, and I keep going, oh, that's how this car needs to be driven. And honestly, with the exception of the fact that the suspension is a bit tired, the dynamics here are right. There's nothing that's weird or sloppy or unexpected. I just go, oh, okay, I have to learn the nuances of this car and this chassis, but I can tell you it's set up well and it responds wonderfully. This is exactly the list. 6-speed manual, rear-wheel drive, dedicated 2-seater for less than $7,500. I did it. $7,000, BMW Z4, 2004. I am proud. I am happy. For the next year we're covering this car, I'm going to say it right now. I think I did better than Paul. I think I did. The Phaeton was a little more of a joke. This, genuinely proud of this. Please run. Please, please don't make me regret I said that.
Here it is, the car you might not be expecting. It's the 2006 Mercedes-Benz SLK 280 for $6,500. It's got 228 horsepower, 221 foot-pounds of torque. It's very closely matched to the Z4, which I really like. We found this car on AutoTempest in Florida, and it's so unexpected because the best part about the SLK 280 is that it's a 6-speed manual. That's right, this is the second generation SLK built from about 2004 to 2010, and indeed you could get them with the 6-speed manual. This was the last manual that Mercedes ever built that connected to a V6 engine. The rest were just 4 cylinders, and then after that, the manual, as you know, went away from Mercedes. So here it is, a manual Mercedes. I wanted a car that I hadn't spent very much time with. I wanted a car that was some kind of surprise or something undiscovered. I can't believe I didn't think about this car until recently, and I didn't think that it would be any good. To be honest, I've been dreading driving this car for the first time because I thought it would be mush. I thought it'd just be an old, heavy Mercedes and not very good dynamically. And I am surprised. The competition is going to be closer than ever. Mercedes built 500,000 of these over the lifetime of this second generation. And you might think that, it hasn't aged too well because of the Formula One inspired styling. I disagree. Look at all the generations from the very first one in 96, 97, all the way to the present where they've changed the name to SLC. Look at all these cars. Of all of them, the second generation, this one has the most character and the most personality. Whether you like it or not, with the F1 nose and the wings and the grille, it's repeated in the interior. Look at this. The shapes are a little bland, I admit. The steering wheel is pretty uninteresting, and if you can get past the old nav system here and the old interface and a CD player, look, some clean shapes, clean surfaces. And despite this thing being absolutely filthy, well, it's still really solid. The build quality is excellent. The doors just thunk. It's still got that German car thing going on 14, 15 years later. The most surprising thing about this car is A, that Mercedes offered it in the manual with the V6, and B, it's good. It's not Honda S2000 good, but it's a mechanical linkage, and it feels great. Crisp, precise, short throws, and I think the clutch is new because it picks up right off the floor. It's brilliant. The heel and toe position is great. Please, Mercedes, build us another manual transmission, because this is exactly what you think a Mercedes manual would feel like. It's awesome. Now I know that you're scared of German maintenance, and I'm taking the hits for you so you don't have to, but I believe this car will run. There's problems with any car you can buy. There's potential money pits, That is an issue. I'm going to pass you. Excuse me. Haha. Bye now. That's what you do in your SLK 280. This particular car is powered by the engine code 272, so that is the name of the V6 in this car. Early cars, on the end of the balance shaft, had a sprocket made out of soft steel, which essentially jumps the timing chain, and it actually causes massive damage in the engine, extensive damage. But I want to assure you that I don't think this car is going to break, because that problem showed up between 60 and 80,000 miles on most cars. But this car has 153,000 miles. As a matter of fact, getting a high miles car might actually be better, because then you know things are sorted. You know the problems have kind of been worked out. Now get this, the chassis, the wheelbase, is 1.5 inches shorter than the Cayman and Boxster. That's a good starting place for a nice recipe. 228 naturally aspirated horsepower, which is also very good. I think many people kind of wrote this car off just because it was a Mercedes, and I think a lot of people think it's the heavy car put on a small car, the smallest car from Mercedes. But that's not what it is, and I'm shocked to find that out. Because this car, as a hardtop convertible, is only 200 pounds heavier than the Z4. The SLK suffers from what I call engineered deadness. If it weren't for the Mercedes brand and having a car that just has to feel like a Mercedes, I think this would be a brilliantly sharp little car. But right in here, there's just this dead zone, this dead feeling in the handling. But as soon as you go through a corner, the car comes alive. I think it's saved by the short wheelbase. There's something here. There's more to it than I thought. See, and it settles into a turn. It's heavy, but I can track. There's not information, it's heavy and thick, but it does hold its line. It does. SLK 280. You don't even need to go to the big boy. You can't, because then you don't get the manual. So of all the cars I could have picked, yeah, I wanted something different. I wanted something that just didn't have much time with. It seemed to be a surprise, and this was a big gamble. This was a car designed to compete directly with the Z4. This was Mercedes' offering. So no, of all the cliches and stereotypes that you desperately want to put on the SLK, throw those all out, because I think there's something more here. Something that nobody told us. Oh, perfect heel and toe right there. See, right through the corner, right there, right there. Ah, there's something more. I hope this thing just runs. We shall see. But again, I'm taking the hits, so you don't have to. Oh, I've talked about German maintenance, and what is it? Will the German cars last? Will they be worth buying at this price? I'm intrigued. There's secrets, there's stuff in this car. And yeah, that German solidity is here like crazy. This is the first in a series of many. We've got lots to do with these cars. We've got lots of driving to do.
Thanks to AutoTempest, we're filming a year of adventures with these cheap sports cars. Be sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a thing. Do your own $7,500 or less search. Click the AutoTempest link in the video description and tell us in the comments what you've come up with.